Special guest today, Bucky Brooks. We were throwing it around, Buck. I mean, Sal and I have both been around long enough to remember you. You were the second round pick of the Buffalo Bills back in 1994. Right on the heels of the run to the Super Bowls. I mean,
Yeah.
what are your memories? Thanks for being with us. I mean, you've done so much as an analyst and NFL media, NFL Network, all of that, and now cover the Jacksonville Jaguars for us here at Believe. But before we get into the matchup Monday night, what are your memories of Buffalo in those days?
You know, it's funny because, I think when you're young and naive, you don't really understand what you're stepping into. But I always reference my time in Buffalo in terms of learning so many lessons, so many team building lessons, having the opportunity to, one, play for a Hall of Fame coach in Marv Levy, play with Hall of Fame players in Thurman Thomas, Bruce Smith, and Jim Kelly, having been around a team that was just synonymous with winning, because I just remember walking in and how Marv would always talk about the number one goal is to win the division, because the division championship gives you a ticket to the tournament. And just how they always talked about, we just want to get into the tournament because once we get into the tournament, we know how to win it. And playing on those teams and being able to, it's a silly thing. I live in LA now, and, Bills Mafia is everywhere. And out in LA, there is a restaurant, a place called Busby's, where the Bills backers go, and it's the same thing. They play shout. They're running around. They got on the blue and red and the Zoomies pants. And I just remember as a young player looking up at the board when the season would change from fall to winter. And on the board before every kickoff, they would have the rumbling buffaloes. And then it would be the snowy version of that. And so I just remember that. And I just remember how, the ups and downs in Buffalo, but how the fans were always very supportive of the team. And so it's kind of cool to see the team back up, even though they haven't accomplished what they want to accomplish. But it's always really cool to see the Buffalo Bills rocking, because there's a big part of me that is forever indebted to the franchise, because it gave me an opportunity to start my NFL career there.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, you didn't play long for the Bills, obviously. I know you got hurt your rookie year and it just never quite worked out, but that was the team that gave you the chance, right? I mean, there's got to be a little bit in your heart, and you just kind of referenced that, right?
Yeah, so even though it was bittersweet, and I will say, it's funny because, I still have, pictures of the kickoff where I got hurt my rookie season. And then I would say, as a player who had never gotten hurt ever in football prior to that, I would say mentally, I probably wasn't in the right place that second year to be able to bounce back and come back. And it's one of the things that, look, everything happens for a reason. I learned a lot through the journey that I had as a player. But I think the one thing that I would say to my younger self, I would have handled my rehab differently, not from a physical standpoint, but from a mental standpoint, to get ready to play amid the expectations of a team that was still, when Jim Kelly was there, they were still thinking that they were Super Bowl contenders, and the expectations of the young players, you had to have a level of urgency to get right and be a contributor. I don't know if mentally I was at that place to understand what I was supposed to do and what I was expected to be for the team at that time.
Correct me if I'm wrong. I think you were on the Packers Super Bowl team, right?
Yeah, so what's
96?
funny about that, so 96, I spent half of the season with the Green Bay Packers on that Super Bowl team. So I went from Buffalo to eventually making my way to Green Bay. I was there in Green Bay. And then about the middle of 96, week 9, I was waived and I went to Jacksonville. But I got a chance in Green Bay to kind of see what I saw in Buffalo. How cool is it that you go two teams that are kind of known for building Super Bowl programs, so you get a chance to see it two different ways. But yeah, that team with Reggie White and Brett Favre and whatever, they were ready to be a Super Bowl team. I go to Jacksonville. We go back and play the Buffalo Bills in the wild card game. And not the wild card game. We beat Buffalo in wild card. Then we go to Denver and we lose to the Patriots in the AFC Championship game. So it's kind of all tied together. So I got a chance to be a part of a Super Bowl team, while also, I would say personally, maybe enacting a little personal revenge for not being able to play in Buffalo and to go that route. So it was kind of a weird journey, but a good journey, because I got a chance to do all of the different things that I was able to do in my career.
Yeah, it's funny. Now we can circle back, because that Jacksonville game, that was the last game of Jim Kelly's career, and it started, Bucky, the weirdest history between the Bills and Jaguars. These teams through the years have just played some bizarre games. And that, quite frankly, was one of the first ones because nobody thought your Jaguars team was going to come up to Buffalo and beat the Bills. And then through the years here, we've just seen so many goofy games, 2 of them in London, that game in 21 that will still rank, Bucky, 50 years down the road, that will rank as one of the worst losses in Bills history, I'm sorry to say.
Yeah.
So, yeah, these teams have had quite a history together, and you've kind of been on both sides of it.
Yeah, it is such a weird thing. So, like, from the Jacksonville standpoint, one, going up in the wild card game, it was a veteran-laden team. It was, look, there was nothing to lose. And I would say that what I've learned about playoff football, sometimes it's not always great to play at home because the pressure and the anxiety can flip on the home team if the game doesn't start out a certain way. There's this angst that playoff games have where, man, the longer the game stays tight, the more you feel it from the stands in the sideline. So when the home crowd is like nervous, like, hey, man, what are we doing? The game is tight. Why are we losing to this team? On the sidelines, you can feel it because there's this urgency that you have to have in the postseason. So, yeah, there have been some weird interactions between the Bills and the Jaguars. And I will say this, like sometimes no matter what the year, certain franchises just have weird matchups, and this has been one that for whatever reason, no matter how good or how bad the Jaguars are, whenever they place the Buffalo Bills, they tend to play at their best against this team and franchise.
Yeah, I go back. I mean, the last couple of years, right? That 9-6 Buffalo debacle down in Jacksonville. And then last year in London, and the Bills had suffered a couple of horrific injuries in that game. Matt Milano, Daquan Jones, but they lose that one as well. Now the game, Bucky, if we can shift to the matchup Monday night in Orchard Park. I think the big question that a lot of people around the league are asking is what the heck is wrong with this Jacksonville team, particularly on the offensive side of the football, from poor execution to really horrible communication. Can you give us some insight into what's gone wrong over these first couple of weeks?
Well, I would say this. I would say that you guys, before we started taping, we talked about the resilience of those Super Bowl teams that the Buffalo Bills had, to go to 4 straight, to be able to shake off whatever happened the previous season, to lock and load and get ready for the season that you have at hand. I would say that in Jacksonville, the collapse of last season has left a bit of a hangover this season. And despite all the conversation that the coaches and players will have in terms of learning those lessons, there still is a here we go again factor that happens in some of these games early in the year. For instance, first game of the year, they're dominating the Miami Dolphins. The first half, the first 2.5 quarters, about to go up 24-7. Travis Etienne fumbles. Next play, Tyreek Hill, 80-yard touchdown. And the wheels completely fall off after that point. You then go have your home opener on the heels of collapsing in week 1, and there's no energy in the stadium. There's no buzz on the sideline. And it doesn't change until Brian Thomas Jr. makes a big play. So what I would say is this team hasn't fully put to bed whatever happened last year, despite changing the personnel. There's still a bit of that hangover, and it will continue to exist until they get a big win against a team that they're not supposed to beat. Then they'll be able to kind of put the bow on that final season and go forward and really concentrate on what's to happen for them in 2024.
So looking at, obviously, Bills fans are interested to know how Mitch Morse and Gabe Davis have factored in there. And we know Mitch. Adam and I covered Mitch the whole time he was here. Great, solid dude, good player, just a rock. He was a rock for Josh Allen the whole 5 years they were together. So we know what he's going to bring. Give us some perspective, if you could, on what Gabe Davis has brought. He looks to me like the same player he was in Buffalo. He can get downfield and make some plays. But then there's times where you're wondering, Gabe, what are you doing? Have you seen a little bit of that so far in just the 2 games that he's played for them?
Yeah, it's funny. You guys are dead on about Mitch Morse. He's been a great addition to the team because what he's done is alleviated some of the pressure on Trevor Lawrence. And, the more that you can take off the quarterback's plate, the better it is in terms of them performing. Gabe Davis, he and Brian Thomas Jr. were expected to add the vertical element to this offense. Last year, I would say that the Jacksonville Jaguars were kind of stuck playing half-court basketball at the YMCA. They couldn't push the ball down the field, and over the course of the season, defenses just condensed the field with their coverage. Well, Gabe Davis and Brian Thomas Jr. have been able to expand that. In Gabe Davis, what you have is what they didn't have is kind of a big-bodied receiver that can kind of physically overwhelm smaller DBs. He has the ability to get down the field, but he's kind of a rough and rugged competitor that can make some things happen. As you said, the consistency hasn't been there because he's still trying to make his way, learn the playbook, figure out the chemistry with the quarterback, Trevor Lawrence. But the potential is there for him to do what he did for so long in Buffalo. Big plays. This dude averaged 16.7 yards per catch throughout his career. So that big play element is there. I think it's about trying to figure out a way how to put the pieces of the puzzle together and how he fits within the context of the offense.
I'll tell you what, Bucky, he was a player that I don't think he ever got his due here in Buffalo because he had the inconsistency and he did have the drops. But I think Bills fans really kind of overlooked what he meant to the team. Last year was a weird year because they just changed a little bit of what they were doing. He had several games where he had 0 catches, yet he's out there blocking in the running game, running routes that were getting other people open. And I just think his contribution was really overlooked. And when he left, people didn't seem to care. And now you look at the Bills receiver group and you're like, well, that's kind of the guy they're missing right now because they have not moved the ball downfield at all. I was wondering if you could kind of maybe speak to his role and how he's done that through his career.
You know, it's funny because he's an unlikely vertical threat, I would say, because he's not necessarily the fastest, right? You're talking about a guy who's right in the mid 4.5s in terms of speed. And when you look at his size, you would think he would be the prototypical possession receiver, the guy that does his work over the middle of the field and is more the chain mover than the splash playmaker. But he has this unique ability to get past defenders, to be a vertical element, to win the 50-50 ball down the boundary. He can do that. The other thing that he can do surprisingly well is he's a pretty good catch and run playmaker, meaning you get him the ball on the move, he'll break arm tackles and he'll turn a 5 or a 10-yard gain into a 15, 20-yard gain just by being able to move after the catch. In the Jags offense, he gives them that. And what he's actually done, I'll say this, he and Brian Thomas Jr. have kind of carried the offense while the established players, Evan Ingram and Christian Kirk, have been really quiet. And if the Jags ever get the stars to play well, then you'll see Gabe make more splash plays where he'll finish the game 3 catches, 70 yards, as opposed to 5 catches for 44 yards. It's incumbent upon them that they get Christian Kirk and Evan Ingram going. Then he can go back to playing the role that he always played in Buffalo.
Yeah, that was the thing. I mean, in looking at the stat sheet, and again, it's only a 2-game sample, right, Buck? You don't want to read too much into that, but Davis is the most targeted receiver in the Jaguars' offense at this point. And they didn't necessarily draw it up that way. And I wondered if we could use that maybe as a launching point. You just referenced it. Ingram's status is still up in the air for Monday night, I think, right, with a hamstring. Is that right? We don't, and that could be a big factor in the game. Very talented tight end. But you look at some of these numbers. I mean, Jacksonville 3 of 7 in the red zone, 5 of 19 on third down. What's it going to take? I understand getting your star players going, but maybe inside from an X's and O's perspective as a former player, what's it going to take to really jumpstart things? And are they in a position to do it Monday night in Buffalo?
Okay, so first things first, we talked about communication and execution at the beginning of the conversation about the Jaguars. One, everyone has to know exactly what they're doing. Everyone has to be on the same page because a lot of their issues have been, self-inflicted things, not being able to get in and out of the huddle, the delay of games, lining up wrong, people not knowing which way to go on the motions. And so you're having a lot of mistakes that you should clean up in preseason. That's been a big factor. Also, the execution up front at the line of scrimmage has not been great. And that's problematic going against a really good Buffalo Bills pass rush where they can win their one-on-one matchups, Gregory Rousseau and Von Miller, Ed Oliver. So the protection has not been solid, which has thrown Trevor Lawrence off because now he's having to get rid of the ball before the concept is fully developed. And I'll be honest, I would say that the ball has gone to the guys that were expected to be the complementary players, Brian Thomas Jr. and Gabe Davis. The main players have not been big factors. And some of that has been, the ball just hasn't gone their way. But Christian Kirk has had a couple of drops that have crushed drives. And this team has not been able to win on third down. So they haven't been able to stay on the field long enough to get a number of plays that will allow you to put up the kind of production that you want.
Hey, Bucky, you saw all this Josh Allen nonsense, Colin Cowherd saying he's offensive coordinator reliant and he's overrated and this and that. You have a good perspective on the league. I know you and Daniel Jeremiah dig into everything. Give us your gut perspective on who Josh Allen is, and is all this talk kind of crazy?
No, look, man. So like some of what we do on our side behind the mic is like we kind of create conversations and content and clicks and all of that. And I think some of the conversation around Josh Allen is just that. When you have a player as talented as Josh Allen, like two things that he hasn't accomplished. He hasn't won an MVP, even though he's played at a high level, and they haven't gone to the Super Bowl. So when you get to a certain stage in your career, those are the only things that you can talk about him. This is a guy who is talented, who has done a lot since he was picked out of Wyoming. And I'm going to say this, like the player that I watched at the Potato Bowl play is even better than I ever could imagine him as a pro. And this is what I would call, like, without disrespecting Josh, this is kind of his Pat Mahomes moment. So when you're building a team, at some point when you pay the quarterback, it goes from the others supporting the quarterback to the quarterback making the others better. Well, when you remove Stephon Diggs and Gabe Davis and you go with a bunch of young players, it's now on Josh Allen to kind of do what Jim Kelly was doing when I was there. Hey, young player, you got to do this, you got to do that. I need to get you at this spot and take more ownership of the offense. Josh is at a point where he's doing that. And even though it's been a little bumpy, the team has responded because there's a tremendous amount of respect for who he is and how he plays within that locker room, which is why it worked. And also Joe Brady tweaking the offense a little bit, where it's a little more traditional, not as much spread it out, more heavy sets with multiple tight ends, Dawson Knox, Dalton Kincaid kind of doing some things. And then I would say a cast of playmakers around them that you're still trying to figure out the pecking order. It has worked for them. And as they get down the line, Josh Allen's growth as a commander will impact how this team finishes down the stretch.
And that's just it. I mean, Sal and I, earlier this week, with all of the positives that have happened in the first couple of games and the 2-0 start for the Bills, we really haven't seen that explosive passing game that the Bills have become known for under Josh Allen. And, it's worth pointing out at this point, there's still a lot to play out at this point, but looking at, who they have personnel-wise and kind of going with the expression is, quote, everyone eats. Instead of having to, look at Stephon Diggs first, they've removed that dynamic with a traditional A1, and they've gone to this and with questions about, can they really get the ball down the field? And defenses are taking that away from them. We've seen that not only against Buffalo, but across the NFL at this point with how the safeties are playing. James Cook has been fantastic in the run game, right? How much of a threat or how much concern would you have from a Buffalo perspective about maybe the state of this passing game and what this offense looks like, albeit this early in the season?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that the Bills have to deal with is not listening to the noise on the outside, right? So because of the offense and the way it operated for 4 years, right? When Stephon Diggs was there, he was the clear number one. The offense had a lot of explosive plays. It was dynamic. They were lighting up scoreboards. This is, and why we make reference to the Pat Mahomes thing, this is very similar to what Kansas City did in terms of when they let Tyreek Hill go and they kind of changed into an everyone eat approach. And the good in that is, from a defense standpoint, it's really hard to figure out how do you tilt the coverage to one player when you really don't know the established pecking order. The bad thing about that is because there's not established pecking order, when it gets to critical moments, who is the ball going to go to? At some point, one of the players on the outside or one of the tight ends will emerge as the number one, and then it will be that person's the number one playmaker, and then everyone around them will kind of fall in line in the pecking order. But that is something that may not be determined until the middle of the season, until you get more games, and Josh Allen and the coaching staff kind of figure out, here's what we do well, here are the best players doing these things. We need to make sure we feature these things within the game plan to allow us to have the best chance of success.
Hey, Bucky, no one knows more than you that this is a push and pull league, right? Things change year to year. Defense does this, offense responds, and vice versa. How do we get back to a point where we have 300-yard passers in this league? I mean, it's just been so difficult for teams to move the ball down the field through the air, all this too high shell and everything that's going on. What do these offenses have to do to get these quarterbacks back to throwing the ball the way we all love to see them throw the ball?
No, it's funny because like the Warren Sapp, when I used to work with him at NFL Network, would say that the fastest adapting organism is a defensive coordinator. And a defensive coordinator quickly adapts to what the offenses are doing. We saw in the past that people were throwing the ball over the top of the defense and big plays. And one of the things that defensive coaches always harp on is, hey, let's keep the ball in front. If you don't allow the ball to fly over the top of the secondary, you always have a chance. And in fact, you guys should know it well, because that is what Sean McDermott and their OD coordinator, Leslie Frazier, that's what they live by. Keep it in front, rally and tackle. We'll get it in the red zone. We'll find a way to slow them down and make them kick field goals. The problem that you have now, people are parking the safety so far in the parking lot that you can't get those things. And what people hate is what they need to see, the running game. The reemergence of the running game will force teams to go and drop a safety into the box. We're not seeing that because for so long, people started devaluing running backs and they de-emphasized the running game. If you change that model and you emphasize the running game and the running back and force people to have to deal with the run game, then you'll get the one-on-one opportunity. So the better that James Cook plays as a runner, the more likely Josh Allen will begin to see those favorable looks that lead to the big shots down the field.
Well, it's fitting that Cook was named AFC Offensive Player of the Week after his 3-touchdown performance in the win over the Miami Dolphins on Thursday night. And that factors in, Bucky, into the next question here as we look to wrap this up. I mean, we've talked about the dynamic on both sides of the ball, the history between these two teams, the fact that Buffalo is off to relatively unexpected success out of the gate, where Jacksonville's 0-2. And, the question, is it a trap game, that type of thing? How much desperation will there be from a Jacksonville perspective? Factoring in all of that, just what's your overall take on how you see this matchup playing out Monday night?
So I think the challenge that Sean McDermott has is making sure that his team has their antennas up and dealing with the Jacksonville Jaguars. A few different things that we know to be true in this league. Monday Night Football brings out the best from NFL players. There's one thing that every NFL player can go back to, and that's their childhood. Watching Monday night, having all eyes on it. Before the Pro Bowl changed and has kind of not become as relevant as it was, that was your opportunity to kind of impress your peers to get the Pro Bowl vote. So it's really important for you to play well on the big stage in the bright lights. The Bills have to know that the Jacksonville Jaguars are going to play their best game on Monday night. There's a lot riding on it. Not only the urgency of turning around an 0-2 start, but the only opportunity that they're going to have on the national stage for everyone to see them. That means that Josh Allen and company, from the jump, they need to jump on the Jaguars and not allow them to have confidence, because if they gain confidence, then it becomes a different game and a game that can go either way.
Is there a more dangerous team in the NFL year to year than a alleged playoff contender that starts 0-2, right? There isn't a more dangerous team, and we got 4 of them right now, because you got to figure the Jaguars and Colts were playoff contenders, and then obviously the Bengals and Ravens. Those 4 teams that are playing those 4 teams this week, that is a dangerous situation as far as I'm concerned. Would you agree that your back's against the wall? You can't go 0-3 these days and make the playoffs. Give me your perspective on that real quick.
Absolutely. And, there's a different level of urgency that comes when you start losing, particularly early in the season. And when everyone looks, because the coaches do this all the time, they bring out the stats on Tuesday or Wednesday, whenever they meet the team, like, hey guys, look, the percentages of going to the playoffs when you're 0-2 or this, but if you go to 0-3, there's only a 2% chance of you making the playoffs. This is an all or nothing game. And you don't want to put that make or break tag on a game early in the season, but that's what it is, because you understand how hard it is to make up 3 games in an NFL schedule. Even though there's 17 games, it's hard because mentally, can you keep your team engaged if they fall to an 0-3 start? That's why the urgency will be at a different level for the Jacksonville Jaguars this weekend.
All right, Bucky, we were talking before we started recording the show here. This will be your first time back in the stadium at Orchard Park since when? And how much are you looking forward to it?
I'm really looking forward to it. It'll be the first time since 1998. I was with the then Oakland Raiders. We played the Buffalo Bills on the road. I remember getting a pass interference penalty against Andre Reed. And I told Andre, I ain't touch you. That's not a penalty. and he gets the thing. So it'd be fun to be back in no matter what. Like, there is something nostalgic about returning to the place where your NFL career started. I have all these trading cards in Buffalo Bills attire. I still have Buffalo Bills swag in my closet. My kids have seen the jerseys and all that. So it'd be fun to go back. It'd be different being on the visitor sideline, but it'd be fun to just kind of feel the energy and intensity. And I also know this. We can talk about Monday Night Football and how excited the Jags will be. I know Bills Mafia always shows up for primetime. It'd be a fun environment to be in. And I think the player in me will kind of have the butterflies before kick.
That's great to
Yeah.
hear. Bucky, thank you so much for your time here on Believe in Bills. And for fans who follow the Jacksonville Jaguars, how many shows a week do you do here on the Believe Network, Believe in Jaguars?
So Believe in Jaguars comes on 3 times a week. Comprehensive look at the Jaguars, everything that's going on, good, bad, and indifferent.
All
You
right.
got to
Well,
send us some of your followers and listeners, man. We got to start building Believe
Yeah,
in
that's
Bills
right.
here. You're way ahead of us on the numbers, dude.
right. We need some
We-
stats, man.
Hey man, we can get to it. We can dig to it. I think part of it is like the crossover stuff. We absolutely can work on that. You guys call me anytime. It's always fun.
All right, Buck.
Thanks,
Just
Buck.
not just for Jaguars talk, but maybe we'll have you on a little bit later on. Just your take on where things stand with Buffalo. It doesn't have to be a matchup with the Jags, given your vast,
Always.
expertise and quality of work. Bucky Brooks, again, former Buffalo Bills second-round pick way back in 1994. Now host of Believe in Jags here on the Believe Network. For Sal Majorana, Rochester Democrat and Chronicle, I'm Adam Benini, WGRZ Buffalo. Thanks for being with us here on Believe in Bills.